Coming to you live from Oakland and the Ubuntu Cloud Summit. I'm here with Stephen OGrady of Redmonk. Stephen, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you, Barton?
I'm doing fine. So let's talk about developers. You just got out of a very interesting talk by the fellow from Cloud Foundry, talking about the developers' needs. And what do you see today? Let's just characterize how the developer world today, for people who are not enterprise developers but more in the web developing, how would you characterize their world?
Their world is it's gotten a lot better in many respects. You know, we have tools that 10 years ago, used to cost money, are now, largely free. The choice that they have, from a component perspective, so they can choose different programming languages, different operating systems in most contexts. They have a lot of databases to pick from. So the world has gotten a lot better in those respects. The challenge, I think, for a lot of them, has been trying to put a bunch of those different pieces together, right? And frankly, that's the promise in many respects of environments, or rather a platform as a service, right? Which is you take a lot of these, integration of these piece parts, and that's not your job anymore, right? That's sort of outsourced to some third party, and all you do is develop the application and put it somewhere. So I think the world's gotten a lot better. It's just, for all the benefits of choice, right, there's a cost to it as well.
Now, when we met, I don't know, maybe 8 months ago when we were kicking off the Web Vertical, we were getting your thoughts on the developer space.
Yep.
And one of the ideas you pitched that time was a developer laptop.
Right.
Why at that point did you think that was a good idea?
Well, a couple things. I mean, I think first of all, if we look at the sort of resurgence of Apple, over the last 5 or 6 years, it's certainly not true that that's entirely attributable to developer interest and developer uptake of that platform. But it's also not true to say that it didn't have a role. The fact that a lot of developers were using the tool, a lot of developers, were buying Macs because they just work, because they were aesthetically pleasing or whatever, developing on them, and more importantly, then developing applications for them. So a lot of those developers would, build Mac applications or build Mac applications and sell them to other Mac users. They would build applications for either iPad or iPhone, and therefore sort of reinforcing the value of the Apple platform itself. So, the fact that this important constituency was basically ignored, by, really actually all hardware suppliers, Apple included, seemed a little strange, frankly. But then the second reason is that we have, done a ton with servers, certainly in the last couple of years, about configuration management, deployment at scale, and so on. But that really hasn't extended back to desktops, right? So in other words, I very frequently have to sort of spin up a Ruby instance or spin up a PHP or Python or some other language instance to test something out, and it's always a challenge to try to get up to speed quickly if that's not an environment you spend all of your time in. Okay, what's the latest and greatest versions? What library should I be using? All sorts of things. And these are largely solved problems on the server side. With tools like Chef and Puppet, and so on. Really handling the configuration side of the house. We've gotten very good at managing servers, but we really haven't applied. I shouldn't say nobody has, but in general, we haven't applied a lot of those same tools to the desktop. And it seems silly that, if I want to, get started on Android development, for example, I would have to figure out what tools to use, or, what libraries to download, and so on, and then maintain them. Right? That just didn't make sense. So, when you put those two things together, you have developers who are important, and developers can be better serviced, with these, sort of the notion of profiles and recipes for common development environments. It just seemed to me that it might be a good idea for somebody to try to take a swing at putting a laptop together explicitly aimed at developers.
And take a swing we did. So, yesterday we announced Sputnik,
right.
And it's a pilot project. It's not an official product that's rolling out at this point. Just curious, what should we be looking for as we roll this out? To be successful at this, what do we need to do, and what might be some of the ways that we take this forward?
I think to be successful, obviously there's the issue that you noted on your blog with the touchpad. That's the most important thing that has to get fixed. But I think in general, sort of as you move forward, you have a very nice piece of hardware. the hardware, the support for that hardware for the environment is also good. The sort of touchpad issue aside, sort of next steps from there, I think, are basically really spinning up these profiles, really sort of nailing down the idea of, all right, I want sort of individual use cases, whether it's Android or Node.js or Ruby and Rails, whichever the sort of use case that a developer might be interested in, whatever sort of environment they want to recreate, the profiles have to be there, to support it. So that, I think, is the most important near-term objective, I would say, in terms of looking at the project.
Cool. And then just to finish with, if there was a specific subset of the low-hanging fruit, which ones would you do? I think one of the things we've gotten, of course, when we posted these, is everybody comes out of the woodwork, which we wanted, to flush out requirements. And of course, you can't make everybody happy, and everyone's gonna have their own. If you were to pick just that small subset that you would concentrate on, what would you focus?
Oh, you mean in terms of languages?
Well, just in general, in the specific target market within the web group, developer group.
In terms of sort of low-hanging fruit, I mean, you could really pick. At Redmonk, I'd have to go back and actually look at the actual list of Tier 1 languages. Basically, it's around a dozen. And the places that I would start would be, you need a mobile story because that's a mobile development is a priority for developers right now. So the simplest thing there is either going to be Android or something PhoneGap based, or both. In fact, so that would be sort of one. JavaScript, is a language that's also very, very popular. It's the most popular language on GitHub right now. I would do that. Number 2. Number 3, you could do Java, and that would be a very legitimate choice. There are millions of Java developers out there. You could also go the other dynamic language route. I shouldn't say other. Java's not a dynamic language in that sense, but Ruby, and or Python would both be very good choices, and there'd be different reasons you'd pick one over the other. But really, any sort of mix of those tools is going to be, a win. Because there's going to be a large segment of developers, whichever opportunity that you pick, that's going to be interested in that kind of opportunity.
Excellent, Stephen OGrady. Thank you so much.
No problem at all.